Mike, do you want to go ahead and introduce your topic and tell us what brought you here today?
Yes. Hi. Hello. My name is Mike Pavek. I'm a retired Army officer. I retired in 2018, and Eagle Group was a big part of that process because they helped me understand what I was looking for, as well as helped me really frame a lot of my experiences into terms that are recognizable and understandable by people without military experience. And so that's what we're going to talk about today: is how to take those kind of diverse military experiences, and then how do you start to filter those into terms that are relatable. So I'm going to share my screen here a second. Okay, just quick screen check. Can everybody see my slides?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So really, when we start talking about translators, or here's like the UN with a room full of translators, everybody's talking at the same time, to try to get help their delegates understand what's being said. So really, translation is not about what you're saying, but it's really about a shared understanding and a common understanding. And so today we're going to talk about tips, techniques, and procedures to do that, and really to take all these different military experiences, regardless of the service that you served in, regardless of the service branch that you served in, and how do we put these into terms that other people will understand. And that's really important. So some of you maybe have seen Star Trek episode 6, where there's a scene where Captain Kirk and Bones are being interrogated by a Klingon officer, a Klingon lawyer, and they're all holding these giant translators to their ears. And then it all starts coming down, all the accusations come down, and things start getting a little bit high tense.
Don't wait for the translation. Answer me now.
Okay. So maybe you feel like you're under pressure sometimes when people ask, so tell me about yourself, and you haven't really figured out how to phrase a lot of your experiences in terms that they will understand. I know when I did my transition, one of my earliest phone interviews, they asked me that question, tell me about yourself, and I hadn't had a chance to really think it through. Plus, I was also in a hospital parking lot. And when I explained it, I could even hear myself using a whole bunch of acronyms, a bunch of terms, a bunch of everything, and I could tell on the phone that I was not connecting with that person, and that ended up not being a job offer through that process. And I think a lot of that was how I set the stage to that conversation from the very beginning. So
don't wait for the translation. Answer me now.
Don't wait again, but we're going to keep going. So we're going to talk about some of the no's when you go through this process. So we're going to talk about kind of a process to do this. So the first one is know your audience. Okay, can I use these military terms? Sometimes you're going to be talking with people with military experience. Sometimes you're going to be talking with somebody with no military experience. Now, a caution, just because that person has military experience does not necessarily mean that they're going to know what you're talking about. So if you've ever served in the joint forces, for example, so that's where you got Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and even some Coast Guard people together, you'll know that even these 4 branches have a hard time communicating at times. There may be acronyms, there may be terms that are unfamiliar. So, and in the same way, even if I'm within that service branch, if I've been infantry, I may have no idea what that logistics officer is talking about because I haven't worked with it. So know your audience. When in doubt, assume that they won't understand what you're saying if you start throwing out technical military terms. Understand their role and their time at their current company. That just helps kind of give you a framework for talking, and understand their previous experiences. So take that time to really understand who you're talking to, because again, translation and communication isn't about what you're broadcasting, it's about what that other person is understanding. Okay, know your purpose. How much detail should I provide? Okay, I have done interviews and discussions with vets where I say, tell me about yourself, and it lasts 10 minutes. One time it lasted like 40 minutes. I had plenty of time on my calendar, so I gave it all to that person. Apparently I had too much time. So know the environment that you're giving, what is the right level of detail. So I list a couple of different examples there: informational interview, a referral request, and a resume. And what are the differences for that? If I'm doing an information interview, a lot of times when somebody says, tell me about yourself, tell me about your background, you're looking at a couple minute discussion. If I'm talking about a resume, I'm talking about just a short blurbs of those individual experiences. But I can go into some details on that. If I'm asking for a referral, I may be going into more detail because I'm trying to tie in maybe one or two key experiences to the job itself. So it might be for a project manager job. So I'm going to talk about some of the special projects that I've done with the military. And I may be able to spend more time on that. Okay. The last no acronyms. Don't use acronyms. If you take a look at your resume, you see an acronym, just get it out there. Why? Because the acronyms make a giant assumption that that other person understands what you're talking about. And so best case scenario is they do. Most likely case scenario is they don't. And now you put them at it in a weird position because either one, they ask you and then feel uncomfortable. Two, they just don't understand and continue on. Three, they get upset and there's like, you know what, this guy can't communicate with me and I'm not interested. So acronyms will hardly ever help your communication. And a lot of times it causes confusion. To the right is Joint Pub 102. It's literally 482 pages of acronyms. And so if the military has to publish something 482 pages long, for itself, for people in the military to understand, what's the chances of somebody that you're talking to that's never been in the military having any idea of what that means? The answer is zero. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of process on how to do this. And I broke this down into three different areas. First is capture your experiences. Second is generalize your experiences. And then third is specialize your experiences. We're going to talk about what these mean in a lot more detail. But really, on the first one, we're talking about just writing down your military experiences. Chances are, especially if you're in the beginning of a transition out of the military, you haven't even done this. So it's kind of creating a big database. The second is now starting that conversion process, demilitarizing your experiences for a general audience. And then the third is kind of that specific one that you're going to want to do in terms of a job, an industry, or a job type of job or a job role that matches. So let's break this down a little bit more. And this is an open conversation. I know we talked about questions at the end, but if you have any questions, feel free, just raise your hand, put a note in the chat. Actually, don't put a note in the chat because I won't be able to read it, or just speak up. Okay, so up in the upper right, we kind of have a difficulty level and kind of where this all falls in. But the first step is step one, capturing your experiences. Like I said, a lot of us have gone through multiple evaluations, multiple years in the military. We have a ton of experiences, but chances are that we've never really written those down, especially in kind of either chronological or functional type a way. So that first part is, and the good news with this part is you don't have to do any translation. It's just putting things down on paper. Where could you find these? So a lot of times you got evaluations, and with the evaluations, whether you're an officer or an NCO, you have to do a support form. So that's one example. Other ones are duty descriptions, but we're going to talk about duty descriptions in just a minute on that. And then other things are things that you just remember that you've done, even if it didn't make it into any official form of writing. It's just things that you know that you did that you want to write down. Okay, so it's kind of like a brainstorming of all the things that you've done. One thing on duty descriptions. Okay, I see duty descriptions on resumes all the time, and what it does is it tells you almost nothing because that's what you should have done. It literally tells what you were responsible for, but doesn't tell you whether you did it, two, how did it go. So duty descriptions are a start. They should be used as an idea generator in case you don't have a specific accomplishments, but don't let that be the end all. My first resume was literally just a bunch of my duty descriptions that I laid down, and I gave it to one of my friends who was retired to look at it. He looked at it, he said, this reads like an OER duty description, but more boring. So don't do that. So we have an example down below from a notional evaluation that I used. And it talks about the objectives and accomplishments from somebody's officer evaluation form. And so their objective was get results higher than any other crew in the brigade, set the standard for timeliness and safety throughout the regiment, and shine at battalion exercise by setting the bar high. The accomplishments are listed there, received numerous accolades from the brigade commander, demonstrated that their crew was the best in the brigade, by placing first in the react to combat or react to contact, the quickest during our brigade exercise. So this is a good place just to kind of start, just to say, okay, this I need to obviously do a lot of work from this, but it's a good place to start. What are some things that might not resonate with a civilian employer that they may not understand? The answer is lots of it, right? So what's a brigade? What's a regiment? What's a battalion? What do you mean? What's a battalion exercise? Does that mean like PT? Is everybody going out and working out at the gym? What is a brigade commander? What is a reacting to contact? What does that even mean? Is that like when I touch my stove, I move away quickly, or what? So even in just that quick glance, there's ton. And frankly, this objective is rather still really, really vague. But you can start to see some of the challenges already just kind of going into this. So that takes us to the next step. Step 2, generalize your experiences. Okay, so what really this is you kind of, this is that first process of, this is a process of demilitarizing, and not necessarily going for a specific type of role, but it's turning those military expressions into expressions that are more common. And a lot of this means that you're going to kind of simplify some of the stuff. Okay, and so there is a process, and we'll talk about this as we get to step 3, that you want to say, hey, this is a really big accomplishment. I want to make sure people understand this. But first, we got to put it in terms that people can understand, and then we got to make it into a much stronger value statement. And that's where the medium risk is because you are simplifying a lot of different things. So I put this into the STAR format because pretty much that is kind of the common format that people will kind of use. Makes it easy for people to understand. If you're on the receiving end, it's quick for me to be able to parse out and then kind of capture what you as a candidate have done. So situation and task: achieve the top team performance metrics for the department. Okay, a little bit vague, but it's kind of clears up what you're trying to do. Your actions, establish team goals in the area of marksmanship, timeliness, and safety. Now, we made an assumption that marksmanship was something that is either understandable or something that you can explain fairly quickly. Develop the team training plan to improve individual and task team accomplishments. And then lastly, as far as the results, received numerous VP level accolades by taking first place in our department's preparation and rehearsal pre-deployment exercise. Even this is a little bit military, but it's stuff that you can kind of talk through. So how do you even get to that point? Well, there's a couple things we talked about previously. We talked about terms that are difficult: brigade, battalion, reacting to combat. So what are some common ways to start to translate that? Is there like a schema that says that people will understand? So here's a couple ways to translate it. These are not all inclusive and they don't always apply. So you kind of got to use some judgment on these. But when we're talking about, say, a company level, that's kind of considered department. When we're talking about commander, especially a brigade commander or division commander, we're talking about some higher level, maybe a director, maybe a VP. It depends on the level of organizations. Here's some additional terms. When we're talking infantry operations, maybe that's a security manager, a security enforcer. Not everything needs to be directly translated, but a lot of it isn't a perfect fit. So that's kind of their challenge that you're working with on this step 2. Is how do I make it a good fit for what I did? So these are places to start, but not places to end. Okay. And then what are some common metrics that I have to do? So literally, I haven't, put any of this. I don't even know where to start in some cases. What are people even looking for on the business world? So I listed 5 here that are kind of the most common. Number 1, revenue and sales growth. Okay. If you're working at a for-profit company, you gotta, they're looking ultimately as what are you going to be able to provide to that bottom line? And that bottom line is generally measured in terms of revenue and sales growth. Okay, so my ability to get more money by selling things. But there's other things too: cost reduction and profitability improvement. So I can make a whole lot of money, but if I'm spending all that money in the end and I only make a small sliver of that, that's really not great for me because that means I got to do a lot of work for just a little bit of money. We have certainly within the military, we understand cost reduction because that is a daily part of our lives, especially as you get more senior in the more senior roles. You're dealing with shrinking budgets, reduced op tempo, reduced, logistics, all these reductions, and still trying to make it work. If you've ever been involved in, say, just having a brigade set of equipment that rotates around, so you don't even have all your equipment all the time, that's an example of a cost reduction method. Process optimization. So nobody knows process like the military. We have processes for our processes for our processes. And so we're always trying to optimize those better, whether it's reducing the number of meetings, reducing the number of people that need to be at said meeting, whether it's reducing our information flows. Okay, we do this all the time in both a garrison environment and a tactical environment. So being able to talk about what you gain, because time is money for everybody. So being able to demonstrate how you have improved a process is a huge, huge value proposition. The next one, people. So leadership is very strong within the military. Whether you're a E4 or an O5, O10, you're always dealing with some sort of leadership roles. So how do you take care of your people? How have they done in terms of promotions? What was your role helping them get promoted? How did they perform their tasks? Did they improve their performance? As a group, did you see big improvement? And capturing those things and explaining those things. You can quantify those things in terms of percentages. So say I was a squad leader and 75% or 65% of my squad shot expert. And then we did a whole bunch of training and improvement that I led and coordinated. And then 90%, shot expert. That is a 25% improvement in just say a week's worth of time. Capturing those metrics is key. The last one's not as common, marketing and partnership development, but there is actually one. So if you are working with foreign forces, for example, so say you deploy to Iraq, Afghanistan, you worked with the foreign security forces, the military forces, and you helped develop that. Okay, you've had to do a whole bunch of stuff where you've assessed their capabilities, where you essentially act as a consultant, where you've assessed their capabilities, where you created some sort of a cross improvement plan for them, including helping them maybe with logistics as well as tactics, as well as personnel management, and then that you can actually capture that improvement, document that improvement by when they did their next evaluation, they were able to perform this, or they were actually able to reduce the amount of money that they were spending, or they grew as a larger team and were able to take on a larger role, than they had previously. All of these are ways to actually meet that. Last piece I actually want to talk about, because I kind of skipped over it, was revenue and sales. And so most of what we do doesn't result in us getting paid more. Okay. But if you look at that last word is growth, that is completely different. So say you create a new training program that is in demand and it actually becomes the brigade standard. Okay, so you started out at a squad level. Let's talk that marksmanship scenario again. And everybody wants to know how Sergeant Smith was able to take his team to a 25% improvement in 1 week. And suddenly more and more people are using this process that you created and implemented. That's an example of creating a greater demand, which in the civilian world means more sales, if done right, and more profitability. So there's lots of ways you've done this. The last piece, I guess last piece again, is how to put things in terms of dollar signs. A lot of people say, well, I don't even know how to say, I didn't get a budget, so I don't know what to do. But you did get a budget. If you have a set number of people who worked a set number of hours, you can figure out rates. You can literally take their annual rate, divide it by 2,080 hours, which is a standard 40 hours a week. I know we never work 40 hours a week, but here we are. And say, here's my hourly rate for each person that I had. And so here was my budget and here's what I did with it. There's lots of ways to quantify what you've done. but it's in metrics that you probably have never used. A lot of people like to use equipment value as a metric responsible for $20 million worth of equipment. A lot of companies, their total sales isn't $20 million in a year. So it becomes a very difficult thing for them to frame. And ultimately, it wasn't like you bought the $20 million worth of equipment. So kind of be careful when you're using some of the common metrics that you always see in the military, and kind of try to put these metrics in terms that they will understand, your audience will understand. Okay, the last piece is specializing these experiences. So we talked about how to generalize these experiences. Now, how do I make it fit a specific role? So say I'm interested in a project management job or an operations management job. How do I use terms that are familiar, not just generally, but specific? Because I want to be able not just to be understandable, I want to stand out. So a bunch of challenges with this, and I put this as a risk as high because it's difficult. The terms and experiences will not be a one-for-one match. Okay, so we kind of have to express that. Just because I got first place in my react to contact drill, nobody knows what a react to contact drill is. So and there's certainly not a react to contact equivalent, at this warehouse that I'm going to be working at. So you kind of really only do this with experiences that have a clear correlation with civilian industry standards. So what I was really trying to get here is be very selective about the areas that I want to specialize on and kind of deep dive on there. Okay, so what I did with this one was change the action. So it's previously, a couple slides ago, our actions were just establish team goals in the areas of marksmanship and develop a team training plan. So how I adjusted this was establish objective and key results in the areas of marksmanship, delivery, velocity, and safety, and then developed an OKR implementation plan to improve individual and team task accomplishment. And so that's kind of one way to do that. So a couple things on this. In order for you to put things into kind of specialize your experiences for a certain position, you have to understand more about that position, more about that role, or more about that industry. So in other words, information is ammunition and will help you. So a couple ways to do that, and we've talked about this a lot, is informational interviews, okay? Sitting down with people. It's not always about trying to find that job. A lot of times it's just about understanding the environment and the role better. And it's great to start with areas that you're not particularly going for that company's job, but you are learning about what does a project manager, operations manager, product manager, some other manager do. The other thing is industry specific and in general periodicals. One of the things that I did was subscribe to the Wall Street Journal about 4 years out from transition, because I wanted to water drip my understanding of and business acumen going into my transition period. And so because I had no idea what kind of industry I wanted to get into, the Wall Street Journal was great because it talks about technology, it talks about automotive, it talks about all these human resources and people. It talks about all these different areas, and it's a great way to get kind of some general knowledge. But as we get more specific, understanding what the industry specifically is looking for helps. And so there's a lot of industry and role periodicals, websites, these types of things that are useful. Webinars. One of the good things that came out of COVID is that webinars became super common. So you're able to get a lot of insight that you previously couldn't get, and a lot of times it's for free. Just maybe sign up for an email and you unsubscribe to the email chain later on. But whether that's going through and hearing stories on how to optimize processes, whether it's webinars on the latest technology and techniques and how that's changing the industry, or whether it's webinars on just how to get jobs, these are really good resources that you can use. And then the last thing are in-person events like meetups, group meetings, these types of things too. Meetups is actually a great resource to use. It's an app that you can put on your phone. And you just search up things like, if I'm a project manager, you type project manager, and you're going to find out a bunch of places locally that people get together. If you're a Google developer, you can see that. And these are ones that you get when you go there. It's a lot of opportunities to network, and it's a lot of opportunities where people are very open to explaining what they do And and then there's always all sorts of follow-on networking that occurs. So these are all great ways to kind of understand more what people are looking for. And as you go through this process, there are even great ways to vet your whether you're talking resume or you're talking points. So one of the things, and let me see, one of the things actually I think I talked, yeah. So actually this rolls into my conclusion. So in conclusion, translating is about understanding, is about being understood. And it also means you understanding what that other person is saying. When you're doing research, so one of the other things is when you're doing your research, sometimes there's things like profitability may seem antithetical to you. It may seem like something that you're not comfortable dealing with. It makes you feel uncomfortable because we always talk like as if profit is bad when we're in the service. So you have to kind of keep an open mind and understand as you make this transition. This transition is about you understanding the civilian world, not about necessarily as much as the civilian world understanding you. And the last piece is gathering feedback on your translated experiences. And I put to see if they resonate and how you can improve that. So this is where you bounce the elevator pitch, you bounce these resume bullets, you bounce all of these ideas off of other people and see, one, if they understand, two, what kind of follow-on questions did they have, because that's an indication of either I piqued their interest, but if it's a lot of clarification questions, it means that I may have not translated this well enough. So always be using and always be learning throughout this process. Okay, so that is one way to do translate your military experiences. What are your questions?